The following is a conversation with on the short-sightedness of Web3 and blockchain, anonymity, and original ideas of where we could go. Hey, it's Nono, and this is the Getting Simple podcast. So yeah, what's up?
Oh man, so much, but also not very much.
So last time we talked, you talked about the recording assistant, so an application that would add key points or be a help as you're recording, maybe as you're live streaming or you're recording tutorials. And you also told me you were doing things with, I think Ethereum, smart contracts, and maybe later Solana.
Cool, man, cool. Well, prepare for disappointment, but also for some personal introspection. That recording assistant, I got it to the point where it like split up a recording I did based on screenshots I took while I was recording. And then I just completely lost any motivation to work on that. I lost motivation with Ethereum too, because it was very discouraging that you had to go with like a layer 2 or some like not officially endorsed solution to actually make anything that was usable. And then, recently my friend told me about Solana, and I've been trying to learn about that. It's a tricky paradigm. I've started building a kind of a cool idea. It's like a NFT type game. It's a bingo-like game on Solana, where instead of like just random arbitrary bingo tiles, it's data about the network itself that is the tile. And so the users have to speculate on the state of the network at a given time in order to get a bingo. So I started building that. And I think there's some cool implications there. Actually, some pretty deep implications that lead like further down the line to like more broad ideas that I've thought of in the past. But I've just realized something about myself. I like thinking of the ideas. I'm not so good at building them. So I'm working on that. So how about yourself?
Yeah, well, I've been pushing through the live stream. So I set up for the second season goals, which started September 2021. I set up three main goals, which is creating community, which I think can go for a long time. And then the other two that are creating what I'm calling a collaborative AI sketching platform. It's something that is going to be running on React, running online. It's going to be a website. And you're going to be having a collaborative drawing board that is going to interact with machine learning models. So that's kind of the main big project I'm doing on the live stream. And I'm trying to at least put 1 or 2 hours every week. And then the other one is an ML course for designers, but that is a bit ambitious. It's, I'm building knowledge and I'm trying to gather some people that are interested in that. And I would like to build tutorials online, maybe on the live stream or in separate tutorial recording sessions.
Very cool. Very cool. Tell me more about the ML collaboration with designers. What's your goal? What's your North Star? What would be your ideal vision of what that turns into?
Well, basically, I did a version of that on iPad in 2017, which was working at like a prototype just with a network called Pix2Pix on the back end. And it worked, but it wasn't accessible, right? It required like building an app that was sort of hard-coded just for that purpose. And I want to make it more accessible. So I want to have like a collaborative drawing board. That's the first thing. And I want to have it as an experimentation arena for us, right? Like for whoever wants to build on top of it to basically manipulate images and drawings that get generated on the app with machine learning. It's, there is no end goal as of getting to sell a product or do something else like that. It's more creating community, learning machine learning, and have a working app that people can interact. I guess like the best thing would be that once this is built, everything that I do on the live stream can be deployed there and people can play with it and use it. And I also want to have a protocol where people might train their own models and they can expose their like bots or algorithms there. So it's kind of like a work place, right, for different people to interact.
And what would these bots do? What would I come along and try and do on the platform?
I mean, this is something I have prototypes and some like simple example I've been showing a long time. You sketch a flower or something and then you get a texture from the back end, like a color texture it fills in. So you're kind of, the name is suggestive drawing, right? So it would be basically the bots are suggesting things of how you could continuate the application. But anyhow, I think, we can talk more about that. I have a lot of videos on that. Today I wanted to see, because I myself have been dabbling with crypto and NFTs and blockchain and things like this, but more at a high level concept. Like I haven't really got into development. I've released some content on the podcast or on the live stream, just conceptually discussing, talking and sharing resources. But I know that you've been a bit more touching this thing, right? Like developing or coding or doing. So if we scroll back a bit, I would love to hear, you mentioned Ethereum is a bit more annoying, or however you mentioned, because you have to do things on layer 2, blah, blah, blah. Can you tell us, as a developer, right? Ethereum, for everyone who doesn't know anything about coding or crypto or blockchain, for them is just a currency, right? It's like a virtual money, similar, like it's like Bitcoin, but another name, right? But sure, as we developers know, there is a lot behind it, which would be the capability of creating apps and entire ecosystems inside of the platform. You mentioned layer 2. So can you tell us, maybe as a concept, what is layer 1, what is layer 2, and what are the challenges, and what are you trying to make there?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I got to disclaim all of this by saying I am a very amateur hobby blockchain developer, and my opinions and ideas shouldn't be taken too seriously. Maybe my ideas should be thought about and pondered, but my statistical analysis and my professional opinion on blockchain stuff maybe shouldn't be taken too seriously. So with Ethereum, to put it simply, well, first thing that comes to mind is there was this video some girl made of like having as somebody trying to explain to a normal person what Ethereum and blockchain actually is. And so I fear that I would end up sounding a lot like that. But basically, Ethereum is just a way of programming money. That's as simple as you can put it. You can say, Nono and I are going to guess a number, and there's going to be some random number generator that lives on the blockchain. And whoever gets closer to that number wins the money that we bet each other. And this can happen without a casino, or this can happen without a government or somebody like watching over this. So that's a contrived example, but it has some pretty cool implications. So the way I view blockchain development and smart contract development, these NFTs, is pretty different than what I think you'll hear in the mainstream of, you have lots of art, you have lots of pictures of monkeys out there that are worth lots of money. And I think that's, it's actually really frustrating, because what that does is it clouds the space with people who are, you hold an asset, which is some NFT, which represents some image. That asset is all of a sudden worth some money because of, we're all monkeys at the end of the day. So we see something that's shiny and that's money, and we go and want to make money ourselves. And so we try and get this thing, and it's now digitally scarce through the blockchain. And now these things have communities that rise up around them that arguably do some good, but are mostly just speculative vehicles, just like large companies today in a way. So lots of people want to fuel the speculation in order to make more money around whatever token their thing is built on top of. So that clouds the space for people who are trying to use cryptocurrency and Web3 technologies for like novel, interesting ideas. And what you end up getting is a bunch of what I've heard referred to as skeuomorphic representations of old school ideas on top of new technology. And one example of that, and this kind of may be outside the realm of any kind of like beginner explanation, but you hear things about like DeFi, decentralized exchanges, automated market makers, lots of buzzwords for things of like how to trade commodities. And to me, these fintech ideas are not exciting and not novel and not creative. They're maybe arguably useful, but I think we can do cooler things. For a long time now, I've been thinking about how to create cool games that promote positive moral behavior. And I think that's like a problem we can solve now, because another thing that smart contracts do is that they allow us to commoditize abstract values. And you can build a network around these things. And if you design the network appropriately, at least in theory, then you can promote positive behaviors. And so what I'm trying to do now, what I've tried to been doing for a long time, and I think this bingo game I just mentioned, I'm going to try and promote consistency and honesty through technology. And I think we're ripe in society for something that does that. I think if we look out at Twitter and Facebook and things like this, we see lots of argumentation, lots of division, lots of polarization. And I think that's overblown by social media. I don't really think that's how the state of the world actually is. I think social media, which is kind of a crazy word for it, is very polarizing. It's like putting on drunk goggles and looking at the world. I don't think the world is actually like that. So that's a little bit of a rant. So I'll pause there. Maybe we can break it down a little bit.
Yeah. You've mentioned the word smart contract multiple times. And even for myself, it was a bit hard to get to find what it actually is, or at least as a software developer, I had to go to a place in which I could see the code of one of these and say, okay, this is it. And this is the minimum viable, right? The minimum thing that you can put on there. And now, okay, I understand it. I know that, or at least I think I saw that in Solana, they try to refer to these simply as programs, because I think the word smart contract made it even more confusing for people. It's like, oh, a smart contract. And I think, at least as I understand it, and you can probably tell us more, the good thing of just calling it a program is because to make it a smart contract, you need to program the logic behind the smart contract. It's not that you just get them for free. So can you talk a bit more about what an actual smart contract is, or a Solana program, or an Ethereum smart contract?
And one thing I like about that language is there's some saying where if you're actually trying to explain something in a way that makes sense, then you're somehow on the side of the good if you're trying to like help people understand. And using more grandiose language than is necessary is obviously not to that end. So a smart contract is a smart contract can hold on to funds and then will respond to events that it sent, and then it can send funds. It can make decisions about what to do. It's just like opening up your YouTube app. When you open up the YouTube app, it does the same thing every time you open it. It happens to be running on it's a client application. But a smart contract is just an application that lives on the blockchain, or I guess a program, like you said in Solana parlance. It's a program that can optionally control money. As simple as, like I said, the earlier example of our little random number thing, or coin flip or whatever. It would be the thing deciding how to flip the coin and then who to send the money to. So we would, for example, say, okay, Nono and I are going to put a bet. We're going to bet $5 on, I'm going to call heads or tails in the air, and whoever guesses it correctly is going to get the money. So the smart contract is going to be the conductor of all of that happening. Is that a good explanation? It's a little contrived again.
No. I think it's good. Can you say like what would be the simplest smart contract that you can write?
The simplest one is just going to be a typical software development program of a hello world. You can write a program, and all it's going to do is you ping it through a GET request, and it will say hello. I mean, that's the simplest thing you can do. That doesn't have anything to do with the blockchain. It doesn't utilize any of the power, but that's the simplest thing you can do. The simplest thing you can do that actually has any utility, there's a lot of examples of escrow. So if I want to, let's see, escrow might be even a little bit complicated. Let's say we want to trade something. I want to trade, we'll use NFTs with the little pictures for an example. I have 3 monkeys, and I want to trade one of my monkeys for one of your bears. And I don't really want to trust you. So I'll trust this program because it's open source and I can see what's going on. And so I'll send it, I'll create a contract. It's just like going to my lawyer's office and saying, hey, like me and Nono are entering into a contract. I've decided to send him 2 bears for one of his 2 monkeys for one of his bears, or whatever silly thing. And then the lawyer's going to write up the contract, and then he's going to sign it. I'm going to sign it. And then we're going to come find you, and you're going to sign it. We're all going to agree. What the smart contract allows us to do is get rid of the lawyer. And so we can just say, okay, I'm going to put 2 monkeys in this contract, and I'm going to say that Nono's a public key, which is pretty much like your mailing address on a blockchain. If you come along and want to trade one of your bears for 2 of my monkeys, then you can come fulfill this contract, send your bear to the smart contract, and then you'll receive my 2 monkeys, I'll receive your bear, and then the smart contract will close. That's the simplest program that actually has any utility as far as I'm concerned.
Have you been doing anything with NFTs? Have you bought, have you traded, have you created any, minted?
I created, it's kind of hard to say like I created any. I helped I learned how to do it. I learned how to put the image, and on Solana it's called a candy machine, like vending machine, but with candy. Basically, you upload your metadata, you upload an image, and then the behind the scenes does a lot of work to deploy these things to permanent storage on Arweave. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's pretty much. Have you heard of IPFS? Yeah, interplanetary file storage. It's similar to that. It's just some cryptocurrency to facilitate file storage.
Is this an interface that is provided for you, or you have to do it through the command line entering codes?
Yeah, right. Oh, well, I haven't done it in a little bit, but it was, there's like three, I broke it down to like three command line commands. They're compound commands, so they have like a little semicolon in there. But you have to upload your files, get the hashes of the files, and then just link it to your metadata. It's very stupid. I don't want to waste any time on that. It's been beaten to death all over YouTube. It's not novel. It's not interesting. But I did buy one for, I bought a shadowy supercoder, which was an NFT that was one of the more interesting things because it was a way of fundraising for an actual service provider on top of Solana. They're a RPC provider called Genesis Go. And so when you actually go and say, what transactions has my account made? And you make a GET request for that. I think it's actually a POST request because it's an RPC call, but you make a POST request and you're actually talking to some like RPC, remote procedure call handler or something, I think is the acronym. And they're the ones that are running the servers that actually communicate with the blockchain. So they make the data available one layer before the blockchain. They're really popular. I bought one of their things for 2.5 Solana back in November and sold it for 79 Solana 2 months later. It's a weird thing. Now the floor, I mean, we can do a quick Google real quick and see what they're actually at. Because I sold before before they did this other thing. Shadowy, let's see. I'm curious. Here we go. Tell you the price here. The floor of these things right now is at 117 Solana. So if I would have held on to it, I'm just trying to show I'm an idiot. Like I did nothing special. I had no talent. I did nothing unique. And yet I made, $15,000 off these things just by getting lucky. And I think that's kind of a dumb way of how this should work.
How did you find it? So who's behind this project?
Yeah, so I found it because my friend from college is actually, he went to a conference and then he met some buddies and then they started offering their service to upload everybody's art and facilitate their drop, if you will. So he told me, hey, I'm doing this. And I was like, I'll support you. And it turns out being one of the biggest ones that have ever happened. I just got lucky by knowing that guy. And I think that's what a lot of it is. I also think it's, for some of these other things, I think there's a lot of, it really feels like glorified insider trading for this and kind of like a Ponzi scheme type thing. It with a thinly veiled, hey, we're supporting decentralized community. And that's just, it's just not. The technology isn't there. The community tools aren't there. And so anyway, that's how I learned about it.
And also supporting artists, right?
That's what they say.
I mean, that's the story behind some of the services. Like Hijacking, I think it closed now. They reopened. There was like Nifty Gateway. There's like OpenSea as well. It's a bit, I don't know. For me, it's a bit blurry what is what. But
they just raised like over $1 billion, I think. It's just ridiculous. It's a bubble. It's honestly just a bubble. But it's a bubble where out of the bubble, there's like a really, really, really powerful technology. And that's where I like try and come back. But it's hard to find people who are interested in building that really cool technology, especially when there's so much money to be made in building the next decentralized exchange or what are all these? They're just these silly little things that people keep building the same thing. I think that's the last one I'll ever buy. I bought some more too, just for fun. None of them were worth anything. And everyone was saying at the time, or you could find people at the time saying, oh, this is a great one. You should buy this one. And it's pretty much who you know and what you know and all insider information for, imagine a community of people who have a lot of capital and the communications that they're having are about future projects to support. And only they know what projects they're going to support. So then they go support the project. And from the outside, from the external perspective, oh, this is we're bullish on this product, on this drop or this thing that people are creating. And it's all because that internal communication that you aren't privy to. I don't think that's the way a market should run. An ideal market should have perfect information for moral actors. And that's not how we are right now. So anyway, you ask about smart contracts and things like, well, did I answer the question about smart contracts, what they are satisfactorily?
Yes. I mean, one thing maybe we can hear I know for people who don't code, this would be just words coming into their heads. Yeah. But for somebody who knows how to code, or maybe just for anyone, what language do you use? Is this coding? Does this look like any other really well-known programming language? How do you learn? It seems like there's a huge community behind these networks, building the programming languages and the systems and testing systems and deploying things.
It's growing with Ethereum, which I moved on from because the fees were too high. I didn't want to go with the layer 2 solution. I don't know. It's like a fear of using a non-first party tool. I don't know. I want to use like as close to the officially supported thing I can. So I didn't want to use Ethereum. They created their own new language for that, which is pretty similar to JavaScript. And Solana actually chose Rust as their programming language. You can also write in C++. But so I've been trying to learn Rust, and it's actually pretty challenging. It's very different than JavaScript. I'm not really like qualified to break down the differences because I don't know enough about Rust. There's plenty of great tutorials out there, but it's very new. And one of the problems with that I see from the community is that if people build something, they're not releasing it as open source because these ideas are so simplistic that anybody else can come and deploy their code and take their profits away. So nobody's built anything really cool on Solana yet. And the things that they have built are all around these like DeFi, fintech type ideas. And so the domain from the fintech ideas don't translate over to like what I'm trying to build. And so I don't really have a great bountiful resource of knowledge to go off of for something like making as simple as a bingo game. Right now I'm trying to, in fact, it'd be, what could be fun is if you and I dove in and tried to write some code, we could kind of learn together and do that as a spinoff if you wanted to.
I would love to do that. Maybe on the live stream, we could jump and do a pair programming session.
I actually paid a guy who's a prominent member of the Solana community, a really nice guy. I paid him 2 SOL for a couple hours of work. We got like a foundation going, but he's pretty busy. So I've been trying to find him again, using my profits from the token to actually build the thing that I think is cool, but he hasn't been available. So I've got to kind of grind on it. But I have a lot more motivation working with other people who are trying to learn, especially if I'm trying to teach what I already know. We could build our knowledge on the live stream. We could just record. We could do whatever.
One thing that I have in mind is that I've been doing hand sketching and art, and I have done prints, and I used to sell some and kind of gonna get back at it. And, the art world in like analog art world or like the virtual art world before NFTs, I think that's always been some sort of a bubble. You always also knew who were going to be the next top artists or the next top thing that you can invest in, or I don't know, conferences or exhibits or things like this. And you would have pieces that, after this event, this piece is going to be triple the price or something. That's always been like that. And when I saw the beginnings of NFTs, I said, this is maybe an opportunity to digitize a bit of my artworks and have some sort of token. Might be for people who cannot get it because it's, you have to physically ship the pieces, and that might be like extra money and extra work. Some people might just want to have a token or something, or maybe with the physical copies I could give away or like sell one of these tokens, right? But it seems like, as you said before, NFTs are becoming just a set of projects, and each project resembles tokens, right? As if they were just money tokens. There are like hundreds or thousands of them. And there's these like drops that people just try to get to a high value and sell on whatever. So it's kind of breaking the conceptual reasoning behind why this seems to make sense in the art community, right? I'm not saying that maybe it was indeed created for that, to just make a point like, look, we can fool people into selling these things super expensively, and maybe one day they don't have any value, or, it's weird, right? So I'm still, also I haven't put the time into diving in and coding. I have a friend that I intend to have on the podcast as well that has done his own NFT smart contract, right, or his program, which allows you to also have this sense of like royalties, and you don't have to go through the Nifty Gateway or through Foundation.app or these platforms that at the end of the day, they take a small fee for each transaction.
They re-centralize
right?
what's supposed to be decentralized. They're like, oh, come to our marketplace to buy this decentralized asset. It's very counter to the philosophy of what should be driving the technology.
It's really convenient, right? I mean, for me, maybe we can talk about wallets as well for people who want to get started with crypto and stuff. On my phone, I have, or my computer, I have my keys for MetaMask and Exodus. I don't know which ones you use, but right now I have them empty, right? I feel more comfortable with like other platforms that allow you to, they keep your keys, they keep your money and stuff, and they're like a conversation where you could have whether that money is safer or not or whatever. But it's tedious, right? If you lose your passphrase or you lose your access to your wallet, then it's on you. There's no way to get back at it. I don't know. What do you use as wallet?
I honestly just keep it all on Coinbase, like you're saying.
Okay,
convenient. I don't have enough to. Yeah. If I had I think if I had north of like $50,000 in currency, I would have a paper. I would literally write down my keys on paper. And I'd give one to my wife because she never loses anything. And then, I'd have them all over not all over the house, because you don't want to, like, okay, someone theoretically could come in, break into your house, find your keys, whatever. Ideally memorize it, and have a hardware wallet, where a hardware, it's, I don't know, like you plug it into your computer and it's the thing that signs it. I don't know enough, to be honest. And there's definitely better resources out there. But I would recommend looking into hardware wallets for any kind of significant money and holding onto it yourself for no other reason than you can. I don't need a bank. I don't need Coinbase. I don't need an external agency. And to me, that's an exciting premise. You actually control your money in a semi-anonymous way. And I think that's really fascinating. But for south of $50,000, it's just like, let Coinbase deal with it. And, if Coinbase loses my money, there's bigger problems going on. It's kind of like...
it's more possible that you lose your passphrase than Coinbase loses your money. Maybe, I don't know, unless you get hacked.
Yeah, there's some kind of inflection point.
There is also this thing that is a bit hard to wrap your head around, right? Like this, usually for newbies, if you know all of this, sorry for me repeating, but if you're a newbie, a passphrase that we're mentioning are 12 words, usually in English, right? 12 words, one after the other. It could be like sand, castle, lights, gibberish, whatever, right? Like any words that you want to put together, up to 12. 12 words in a row with a space in between, usually, or just putting them in different input fields. That makes your passphrase, and you can basically, what that will do is unlock a set of, as you said before, public keys that show up for every token that the wallet supports. And then they can check, okay, does this public key has any tokens in each of the platforms? And if it happens to be registered that in that wallet, your Bitcoin address has coins, then those belong to you. And you basically have the private key or the lock, the key that opens the lock, right, to use those funds.
Yeah.
Isn't it weird that anyone, anywhere in the world could just write your 12 words and unlock? But, the possibilities are super high, but I think it over and over and over, and it's super weird that's it. You don't need anything else.
Yeah. For anybody that wants to look into that, that's called the BIP 39 protocol, I think. Bitcoin Improvement Protocol 39 is where they made it so that you could put those 12 or sometimes 24 words together and derive your public keys or your private keys. That derives your private keys, which, it's very weird. I've been very interested, and I haven't fucking read this book. I've got the bookmark is in the middle of the book, but I haven't read that much of it. It's Claude Shannon's collected works, and he's the founder of information theory. That actually brings up a really interesting point that, 12 random words can derive your private keys, but the chances that anybody could guess those 12 words, like you said, are just astronomically low. It just gets so deeply philosophical. I don't know how deep you want to go with it. He has this quote I watched in, do you subscribe to a Curiosity Stream?
No, what is that?
It's like YouTube, but for nerds. It's like all nerd stuff.
Oh,
It's like
actually,
Discovery Channel
yeah,
slash like, you probably heard about it.
I've actually seen it advertised on Daniel Schiffman's live stream.
Yeah. Who is that? Daniel Schiffman?
Yeah, the coding train.
Coding train. Okay, you'll have to send me him.
You should take a look. Yeah, so anyhow, you were talking about Claude Shannon, information theory.
Yeah, super interesting guy. And one of the quotes he had was, information, I want to look it up. Information is the disambiguation of, no, information is the something of understanding. I've got to look it up because it's the coolest quote. But it's just that all money is information. That's all a monetary network is. And there's a thought experiment you could do. Let me look up that quote. Information is the Claude Shannon. Claude Shannon quote.
Well, you look at that. I think this has to do a lot, or at least is mentioned a lot on James Gleick's book, The Information. So I would recommend that to you if you haven't read it.
Love that book. That's another one of my favorite books. He's amazing. Information is the resolution of uncertainty. So if you just think about that for a second, it's just such a cool, whether or not the information is good or bad or evil or and heavenly or just innate. It's the resolution of uncertainty. So it's fascinating. So why I bring that up is those words. Those give you access to your private keys. They can derive your private keys. Your private keys are the things that can tell the network that, if you have these private keys, you are, for all intents and purposes, that person. You're allowed to act like that person. And then it gets into what is identity, and what is money, and it's a really, really fascinating thought, rabbit hole to dive down.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of logging into Facebook or Instagram, right, you just have to put like 12 or 14 characters, and that's it. Just your email and your username or your cell phone number, and 12 characters. So 12 words is a lot safer.
A lot harder for these centralized data vampires to get a hold on all of your information, to then go and brainwash you with advertising to go buy things you don't need to make yourself feel happy, or to make you think that you'll feel happy if you buy them. So
there is this also kind of like a thought exercise. I think it went viral on Hacker News, right? There was this service, or there was this website called playexo.com. And it is a website that is able to generate every existing possible, I think, private key and public key for Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And there's like, I think there were like 2 to the 256 power pages that each had 128 keys. If you give that to somebody, that's like your bingo, right? But somebody was mentioning that it's less likely to find a key that has funds than looking at every single atom in the universe or something like that. I might be, I'm not an astrophysicist or something, but the rationale of that is like, if you imagine every single object that you're seeing right now, and you have to go into their atoms, right, and check each of them individually, right, until you find money in there, or like some sort of magical token that is going to make you rich. That is what it is, right? But when you see it on a site and say, okay, there are many possibilities, but I can refresh this continuously, it seems more plausible. You would get an option, like a valid option at some point. It's interesting that at the edges, right, like the last page and the first page and the ones that are adjacent, they are accounts that actually some people used, probably reverse engineering, right? Like this is the last and the first page. We're going to use some things from those. But apart from that they had, that reason to have been used at some point, it's impossible, right? But you could be, you could be lucky and find like thousands of, hundreds of millions of dollars from somebody. But it's, it's not possible.
I think we could say there are definitely more efficient ways of making hundreds of millions of dollars. Still doesn't make it easy, but I think spending your time trying to guess these, or having your computer try and guess them, is probably a waste of time. I think it's a safe bet. It's all a bet of, cost benefit analysis. Yeah, you could spend all of your life looking for those numbers, or have to figure out, a computer to try and do that. But
what's interesting to me is like whether the person who built that site set some sort of trap of where the likely chance that somebody refreshes enough times and finds something, he would get notified in some way, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like crowd force, right? Like
looking for like cancer in data.
Every single individual that gets like wrapped around says, oh, this has to have something. They might be like for 3 hours testing, but it's that person and the other person and the other person. And then, there is an increased chance there, but still it's like negligible. It's like not something, I don't know.
That's funny. Yeah. That's funny. And then you could have like an NFT where if you find a random Bitcoin address that has funds in it on this site by refreshing, it mints you an NFT, and then I don't know, it's silly.
What are other terms, maybe other cryptocurrencies or projects or blockchain projects that you think are interesting, or maybe even layer 2 or other layer applications that are in Ethereum or other networks? There is like Pancake Swap and Abracadabra, and there's like thousands of weird names that have. It seems to me, it resembles to me the sort of looking of Glitch. Glitch.me, that is like really colorful and random project names. And you know what Glitch is?
I know. Glitch.com, where you can write your websites and stuff.
It seems like the same aesthetic where like a lot of random domain names and a lot of random apps appear, and people are just putting their keys there and passing money through and doing staking, and I don't know. It seems like a bit out of control if you don't follow closely.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, I don't want to sound too much like a pessimist, but at the same time, I think a healthy amount of pessimism would be good for the sake of the future of Web3. I don't think we're in a good space right now, but I think everyone's pretending we are. It's kind of like the age-old story of the emperor is not wearing any clothes. Nobody's saying the emperor is not wearing any clothes because everyone keeps making a lot of money doing these silly ideas. I think the silly domain names, and I think the proliferation of seeing all these similar ideas is just a symptom of the fact that you can just make easy money. If you have like an exchange, if I stand, or you say Pancake Swap, I know there's something called Sushi Swap. Like at the end of the day, you have this thing and you want to trade it for this thing for a profit. The program that's sitting in the middle of those two things can also take a cut. There's always going to be a middleman with somewhat centralized technology. And so despite the fact that the technology that's running the show is decentralized, the people that are putting centralized systems on top of this thing are doing so in order to pull out a little bit of money from that transaction. Maybe you could argue that it's better than a bank if you want, or it gives people more freedom with their money if you want. And that's fine. That's like a reasonable argument, but that's not the argument we should be having. That's not the debate. That's not the conversation we should be having. It should be, how can we use this technology to make the world a better place? Kind of like what Google used to be doing, what Silicon Valley claimed to be doing for 20 years. We can actually do that now. I'm fully convinced. I might be a crackpot, but I'm fully convinced that we can use this technology for good. And I'd love to talk to you about some of those ideas as well. But at the end of the day, you have some kind of commodity, some kind of asset, and you're trading it for some other asset. And so there's various different ways of doing that, but there's only so many ways that you can do that. There's only so many different ways to skin a cat. And so people come along and they're like, oh, I'm making another, the best liquid exchange on cross-platform, fill in your Mad Libs buzzwords bullshit. And here's my site. And I called it Monkey Exchange. And it's got like a cool, like dark color theme, whatever.
The graphics are awesome. Like I'm
the graphics surprised. Are really good.
Like I say that, who's behind these things? Are people like banging the keyboard, and how much money and how many resources they're putting into building the things so they're appealing, right? Like 3D animations and gradients and colors, and I don't know. It's all really. It's kind of like creating even a new aesthetic of the web, right? Like just behind all of these things. Just one thing I wanted to add to what you said before. You're talking about intermediaries, right? It seems like, for example, Amazon made buying things online so convenient. You don't have to go to the store, and basically they're taking a cut. That is a solution for us, but it's also a problem, right? Like we could, how many times if you, I don't know, at least here in Spain, if you call to a place, many times they just by booking or ordering something directly to them, they can charge you, like booking.com, for example, right? Like there are many places. I was going to Italy months ago, and I called and they wanted to give me like a 25 euro, like a $30 discount just because of calling with my phone for like a 12 or 24 cent Skype call, right? Just because they have to pay so much to Airbnb and Booking and Amazon for all of these automatic tradings that basically they're Amazon or like the big guys are absorbing. At the same time, for me, I need to set up my own infrastructure. I need to set up Skype. I need to know how to call. I need to call. I need to do that thing that for somebody else who doesn't know and is used to booking, they can just go, put their credit card, boom, booked. And then you've literally spent, even though they tell you it's the best price you can get, you've probably paid like $20 more for the deal, right? And what happens with things like Coinbase or Kraken or like Gemini or things like this, you're talking about layer one of Ethereum. I think last week the transactions were up to like $200 or $300, right? For like the gas fees or something. I don't fully understand how. I mean, I know that that's just to make any sort of transaction level like on the base layer, but if I go into Gemini, I sign up, or Coinbase, and I can buy and sell Ethereum for like a really, really tiny fee. They're absorbing it as well, right? It's like cents, or like it's like a tiny percentage.
Think about all the data they have. If you're right behind the wall listening to where everybody's transacting, you can go somewhere else and make huge trades off the book and make an enormous profit, therefore offsetting those costs through what effectively is insider trading under the guise of decentralization. It's really, I think we have a lot of corruption, and we could talk all kinds of conspiracies about how the world is run today, big banks and families that own everything, and stuff like this. That's fairly reasonable to look at and extrapolate. But I don't think what's happening with crypto is good now either, because I mean, why is Coinbase worth $1 billion? Why is Kraken able to absorb those costs of, if you just look at the volume of Ethereum trades and realize that all of well, first of all, there's also that you don't actually own the Ethereum that you buy on Kraken. They probably have a bucket of Ethereum, and then they'll say in their centralized database, hey, Nono's got $30 of Ethereum. And so if you wanted to send that Ethereum to somebody else, then as soon as you withdraw, it's a $90 fee, right? They get you going out, but don't care coming in because they're just like a regular bank using your money to speculate on other things. I would be pretty confident.
Yeah, that seems like what banks want to do if they want to offer financial products with crypto, right? Because they would just want to buy, and this is probably why they're like big whales acquiring many, because then they can say to a bank, okay, I'll give you or I lend you, I don't know, like 2 billion in Bitcoin, because now you're going to be able to offer it to your clients. And you're basically, for every client you have, if they sell or buy, you're just, as you said, you have a set of slots and say, okay, now this is for this guy and this is for that guy, but it's not moving, it's just there. So they're just charging fees out of thin air, right? It's just like moving digital numbers from account to account. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it seems like the world that we're creating online is like all of this. If you're an intermediary, you're going to be able to make money. And if it's online at a fast pace, you're going to be the one benefiting. And definitely, like, if you just want to make money, you don't care about the ethics, it's a great way of making passive income, right? Like if you have a service that works. But I agree with you that there is a moral implication that, they're not telling us. And it's definitely not Web3. Right? It's not. No, it's not. How would you define Web3? Because it's also a term that many times just gets named to refer to some high-level concepts, but it doesn't get defined.
For me, I don't even bother defining it. If you're using any kind of blockchain as some part of your database, as some part of your storage layer or incentivization layer for user behavior, I think that's Web3. I don't really care to define it. It's just another buzzword. Web 1, it's like, oh, well, UPS.com, like who cares? And people want to say the problem with Web 3, and they present this like very thinly analyzed thing that will appeal to people. And I don't think anybody's getting it the real, like, what is the actual good we could do with Web3? Like, is it like be a Web3, not a maximalist in the sense of like, oh, I should put all my money in crypto, but how can we actually do good with crypto? I don't know. That's where it's fun to think about solving actual problems. That's where my mind goes.
Could you give us like maybe recommendations, like where you have learned, maybe YouTube channels or like anything like media wise, like for reading or for like studying or watching things that have to do with the crypto world and these things that you've tried to be doing with smart contracts?
Yeah. So a lot of the theory is just being a crackpot and thinking myself, but for actual implementation, I really like Doug Anderson. I'll send you some links here. He's made a few really good tutorials. Doug Anderson there has a Solana and Anchor. With Solana, there's a library on top of it called Anchor that really helps you write programs. And I'm not going to go into too much detail there because there's already plenty of detail out. It just makes those easier. There's also a guy named Henry E. He's got quite a few tutorials. There's a guy named Brian Friel, whose website is brianfriel.xyz, who has some good tutorials. These are the ones I've used.
Yeah, and we'll put those on the show notes whenever we share this.
Okay, cool. I forget his name. Nadir Dabit? I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's got a complete guide to full stack development with Solana. He builds a React application that interacts with the with Solana's backend. There's one more.
So I think I can ask you maybe to send that later as well, so we can.
Yeah.
To just a question, right? Like when I met you online, I think you found the YouTube channel or something, and then you reach out on Discord, or I don't know. It was like a fortuitous encounter. Yeah. And can I ask about why you like anonymized all your social media accounts?
Yeah. Great question. So I did that because, first of all, I didn't know why I did that. Like, it wasn't immediately clear why I wanted to do that. But as I like try and think through my ideas a little bit more, it's become more clear. One of the things I want to build, or like my North Star, is some kind of anonymous community. Like, imagine if QAnon was like was raising money to plant, like to replant the rainforest, like doing really, really good things, like Mr. Beast type things. I think there's some ideas I have that are like pretty weird and don't want associated with my main accounts. And I want those separated, and I don't want them to be attached to my real identity, because I also want to reveal like the thought process behind how they were created. And at times that thought process is very, I mean, it sounds crazy. And so I often tell myself the only people that are able to effectively, positively change the world are those crazy enough to believe they can. So I probably, I like, if I think about how I sound now talking to you, I probably sound like a little bit of a pessimist, but I don't sound like, nothing I've said should be too controversial. But some of the underlying motivation for my thoughts probably does sound a little like, what, if I were imagining coming across somebody who thinks like the underlying thoughts that I think, I would think they're just a crackpot. And I probably wouldn't give them the time of day. I would hope I would, because I'm me. But yeah, so I wanted to anonymize those because I do a lot of screen recordings when I'm creating ideas. And I think sometimes of like creating like digital art, not in a traditional sense, but like interesting, like recursive, taking like my phone, sending it to my iPad through Discord and doing a screen share, and then broadcasting that to my computer, filming those things, and then like typing stuff as a way of like creating some kind of digital wax seal of like proof of consciousness, proof of creation. So I do stuff like that. And while I'm screen recording, I don't want to reveal identity, because eventually I want to create something kind of, to be honest with you, to be completely honest with you, I want to be like Satoshi Nakamoto. I want my thing that I build, I want to be like Satoshi Nakamoto, where I'm completely anonymous, and I've created technology that's improved the world. And that's twofold. Whether or not I succeed or not is another question. But imagine being like Mark Zuckerberg or being like Satoshi Nakamoto. Which would you rather be? It's like, it's pretty obvious. You get the fuck out of here. I don't want any attention. I don't want to come off as doing this for attention or fame or anything. In addition to the fact that I think fame is toxic, and I think it rots one's personality and one's ability to actually like be themselves. And why that happens is more interesting to look at, but I think would get a little bit more conspiratorial, unfortunately. Does that make sense?
It does. It reminds me a bit when I read Edward Snowden's book, right? He rejoices on, the stories that he tells when he first got hooked by the internet, that he could get into forums and he could create different usernames, right? And he would have a dedicated username for all the newbie questions, right? Like, we're all newbies in certain areas, but sometimes you feel like you're going to be like, I shouldn't ask this like entry-level question if I'm an expert, right? And that kind of prevents you from developing yourself and from learning. So he would have different, like the super high-tech DevOps person profile who only comments on high-level areas, right? And the newbie that's continuously showing that he's just learning and asking new things. And he could have unlimited sets of personas that would interact with the same people. And I don't know, maybe the other people don't do it. Maybe they do it as well. But nowadays, everything that we do, everything when you live stream, when you share, when you tweet, when you write a comment, when you buy something on Amazon, when you put a review, everything has your mark on it. And, it's tied to your thumbnail and your full name. And I don't know, it's kind of like surveillance, right? Like they're like, they could gather everything that is being shared from the same account, from the same username and stuff, and make a profile of who you are and what you've done. So sometimes I think the same way that it's not super, I mean, for me right now, like if we're recording screen and, the camera and it's under our names, and it talks a lot about, I think we are limited in the ways that we can express ourselves when we are being continuously judged personally, right? When they're not,
especially,
we don't have that freedom of speech in some way. You have freedom of speech, right? You can say whatever you want, but because it's behind your face, behind your name, you also have the freedom to like fuck your life if you say something that you shouldn't. And that will hand you.
And here's real quick though, there's something right there. There's like a diffraction that occurs. So there's people that are like, oh, the Jews run the media, we should extinguish the Jews. Like these really weird, fucked up things to think. And then these other people who are like looking at society, I find myself in this bucket. Personally, I'm looking at society and I'm like, it looks like everyone's fucking crazy. Like nowhere where you look out and you see something presented either through media, through collective media, through anything, even decentralized media. You go to these sites like Ruckus or 4chan, and it's fucking people chanting for people that are literally committing mass murders. And it's like, oh my God. And you see the other people and they're like, the COVID is everybody who gets vaccinated is going to die. And it's like, well, no, it's weird. Like what's going on? There's something weird that's going on, but it's probably not that they're trying to that the government is trying to control the population, but you can't you either say what they're saying on CNBC to your family when you're having communication with your family or whatever, or you're a conspiracy theorist, and it's just like, no. It's like, that's not scientific. And so there are people that are saying what they believe, and Jordan Peterson comes to mind a lot because, he's put himself out there, but something as mundane as saying, standing up and saying, I'm not going to let the government mandate my speech. And that's like a pretty reasonable thing to say, in my opinion. But he's a little bit older and doesn't understand this new technology. And so I do feel like a little bit of a coward hiding behind this mask of a persona that's anonymous online. But at the end of the day, I don't fucking care if I'm a coward, if I've been able to affect positive change. I want to create those anonymous identities in order to see what it would be like if we can actually express how we feel, if we're good people, but also with the check, like the check and the balance of like, well, what would a good person do? Because that's, Nietzsche's quote, God is dead and we've killed him. I'm not a religious person, but God used to decide, so to speak, or like at least guide our understanding of what is good. And now if you ask what is good, it's hard to answer that. And I don't think that's a good thing at all. And that shouldn't be a controversial or like profound viewpoint. But like, how do we figure out in a digital age what is good and what should we aim for as a civilization, as a society? And so long story short, I want to build like a new Declaration of Independence for online. Fuck the British. I know you're not like, you're not from you're from Spain, right? So, but are you familiar with like, we were like, no, we're not going to get taxation without representation of government. So like the founding fathers left and then they founded the United States and they were like, oh, men are created equal. Oh, except for slaves. Slaves are not equal. It's like they're very hypocritical, but also like have good goals. How can we eliminate the hypocrisy, set a really, really solid goal that everybody can participate in that's actually like this equal footing for everybody?
What I feel is impressive is the paradigm that people were feeling that they were surveilled and that people were gathering their personal data. But when they gave them the power to be the ones who are sharing and deciding, people are so willing to be sharing every single aspect of their lives that I don't think anyone could expect that would happen. And, teenagers now, they're growing with this culture of like, everything I do. I mean, now think about it. Like, wouldn't you want, if you're like a teenager, the first time you use a bicycle to record that moment, wouldn't you want to share it with everyone? Wouldn't you want to do that with every single special thing that happens to you in your life? It feels like we're ingraining the entire, our brains with that reward. And it's not a reward, as you're saying, that benefits us. It's not something that is thought in a system that, as you said, I'm tracked to your, body mass and weight and your heart rate. So I'm going to be emphasizing the stimuli that is making your heart rate perform the best in your daily life. No, I'm just going to push notifications in a way that you're going to be checking your phone more often and that you're consuming more and you're going to buy more products. And we all fall because at the end of the day, we're all different. But if you look at the global world, every single individual has common traits that can be triggered in using the same mechanisms, right? So I don't know. It's a really weird paradigm, I would say. And it's hard for me to think of, for example, Instagram in a way that is better for people. I think that looks like don't create an Instagram account, because the reason why platforms like that work is because they hook the individual and they hook the masses to follow them. And at the end of the day, I don't know, it's proven that that's not a super good habit. What is this? So
this is just
showing stuff.
Yeah. So I get so distracted with these things. I've tried to make my phone as ugly as possible. I turn on color inversion mode and put on a weird color filter to make it so it's not as appealing. Because like, let's look at Instagram with the color filter on. It's actually very strange.
I read the other day, like if you do, nice. Yeah, if you put it black and white, right? Like as well, like it will.
Black and white actually,
you get used to it.
Isn't as effective as invert, because black and white, I feel like I think the neuroscience is there, where there's so much more information in a black and white photo. But if you go inverted, look at that. Like, yeah, I don't care I'm not tempted to scroll through this. It like hijacks the hijacking of my brain, where I don't feel as compulsive to like, I'm going to pick up YouTube and go scroll through thumbnails and try and find a video to watch. So yeah, that's like a common approach. So the other day when I did 2 hours with this guy to build like the foundation of this little bingo app. And I felt we were pair programming and I was telling him the idea and he was building it. He's an expert in building. I consider myself to be an expert theorist, which you can't ever prove, like, except through like capital means. Like, does your idea work in the real world? And if I can't build it, you can't prove it. So I was paying this guy. I knew we were on the clock. I was pair programming with him. I understood everything he was doing in the framework and writing the code. And I understood everything. It would have taken me so long to build it myself. probably at a scale of either 10 or 100x. I felt so driven in that 2 hours, so like motivated to like build with this guy. That's where I want to be. For me personally, I know it was more of like the broad you, like what would you do? But for me personally, if I had that capital, I would produce completely open source work that benefits the people that use it, and that's configurable in a way that will most certainly increase their subjective well-being. And that's what I want to do. But that there's no, like, how do you pitch that to a VC? How do you pitch that to anybody? It just doesn't work like that. So I want to then build the ways of making the funds in the first place to then be financially independent, and then recycle that capital in this kind of way. And this bingo game is actually like how I'm going to try and go about doing that for the first time.
So can you just, if anyone's listening, can you say what pair programming is? Because we've mentioned it a couple of times today, but we didn't explain it.
So most of the time when you're programming, you're doing it by yourself in isolation, and then you push up your code, all your changes. It'd be like if you're writing a book and you write 3 chapters and then you send it to all your friends at the same time, and they all read it at a different time than you wrote it, and say whether it's good or not, give you some feedback and stuff. And then if they think it's good, it makes it into the book. If they don't like it, then they send you some feedback and you address the feedback, and then hopefully it makes it into the book eventually. What pair programming is, would be Nono and I sitting at the same desk ideally, but right now with you know, the global society we live in, and especially COVID, we're going to be doing this on the screen. I'll share my screen. We'll open up a text editor program, and Nono and I are actually going to write the code together. And if he has questions about what I'm doing and he's paying attention, which Nono would be because he seems like a cool guy to pair program with, then we're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And what do you think about this idea? And it gives you this little bit of added confidence of, I'm just going to try this. If it doesn't work, we'll go back here. In order to do that as an individual, there's a lot more you wouldn't think there would be if you weren't a programmer. And maybe disagree with me if you disagree, Nono, but there's a lot more cognitive load on doing that alone, because it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should do this instead. There's a lot more, I don't know the term, but like doubting yourself or doubting where you're going. Whereas if you have 2 people in the driver's seat and they're both motivated to create and learn from each other, then there's this like magical spark that helps bring you forward in the creation process. And that's about the coolest feeling when you get that. You're like, oh, what about this? Like, did you try this? And so that's like the magic of pair programming. It also helps share knowledge of, go back to the book analogy. If we're both writing, you'd be like, oh, you didn't explain that character well. I'd be like, oh, no, I did. Oh, wait, you're right. Let me go back and explain the character a little bit better. So it helps you write a better book, even though only one of you is actually writing.
Yeah, no, that completely applies to what I've experienced, because when you go on your own, if you have to do things and you know what you have to do, it's always good to have focus time by yourself. Like you can spend hours refactoring things and doing things and blah, blah, blah. The like asynchronous review is really good for doing that. But when you're really immersed into something and, you know, maybe somebody has experience in a different side of the things that you're doing, or maybe they're just looking and they're asking questions that you didn't ask yourself, and that maybe asking them earlier than later is going to make everything better. Or I don't know. It's just like what you said. I think you were looking for, like, there's like a constant validation, right? That somebody's looking over what you're doing, and you feel like somebody's telling you, okay, this is okay. That's kind of like if you're a kid and you're learning something, if your parents are around, it's like, I probably not doing it wrong because nobody's saying anything. So I don't know.
Maybe a kid, but how about a convolutional neural network? Or how about, an adversarial neural network where it's like, nope, that's not good. Nope, that's not good. Nope, that's not. And it's going through this like really, really tight cycle of, yes, that looks like a frog. Yes, that looks like a frog. No, that doesn't look like a frog. It's literally how we train computers. And since we're working with computers, I think there's just such a parallel there, philosophically, metaphysically, whatever it is, of that's how you work with computers. Because at the end of the day, writing code is talking to computers, but you also have to talk to people through your code and making your code's intent make sense. Because I could write the YouTube app in a way where if you open the code base, you'd be like, the fuck, you could obfuscate the code and change all the method names, all the variable names, all the class names. And that's actually what ends up happening to compiled code. but you're also talking to your teammate. And so it's very important to have that feedback loop, and it just doesn't exist enough.
There is one thing that I wanted to mention, that coding for yourself. So when you're creating an application, there's a huge leap, as you said, from doing something not just on your own and documenting and things, but doing something that is for yourself. Like if you do something for yourself, like a command or like an UI or like an application that does something, you just need it to do the thing. And you don't need to document it, to name variables properly, to test it. There's no reason except for maybe writing notes so you in the future know what the code is doing if you come back a year or 2 years later, or document the thing for you. Because one thing to know is like when you're writing code, you are a different person after 5 months or 2 months have passed. You don't remember writing certain things, or maybe you don't remember decisions or how to run, how to install, how to resolve things. So that's for the developer side, right? But there is another step on the user interface level where, you might be writing a command that makes sense at the moment, does its thing, and that's it. But if somebody else has to use the thing, it needs to be readable, it needs to have UI, it needs to make sense, it needs to be contextual in terms of being intuitive to other tools that the person has used. I don't know, it's really different. And, when you're prototyping, you're researching, and then you go and say, okay, I'm going to do something that actual users are going to use, then it's a mess because you have to test, you have to do testing sessions with real users using the thing, and they click on the buttons that they shouldn't, and say, no, click on this one. And say, like, are you going to be behind their shoulder for like thousands of users that you intend this application to be used by? You can't. I mean, you need to maybe, if you're saying click here, you maybe need to remove the other button and make that button bigger and say like, click me, right? So I don't know.
And then that logic, when you add that logic in, you're like, why the fuck did I hide this button if they haven't gone through this flow? And then you remove it, and then your users get, it's a whole, I guess maybe if we're hitting a time wall here, we could close with the thought, something I've thought a lot. Full disclosure, sometimes when I'm talking about these like crazy thoughts, sometimes I just love getting just super ripped and just recording all of what I'm thinking at the moment. And surprisingly, it doesn't make sense like after the fact. It's like pretty grandiose ideas. It's how these like society improving ideas. It's how my mind goes to like society improving ideas. So anyway, I've often thought about imposter syndrome and the fact that everybody's a goddamn liar. None of us are experts in this technology because it's only been around for like, if you're being generous, it's only been around for 60 years. Our ability to talk to computers. Think about carpentry. Think about something you can be an absolute expert at, or automotive building, or, welding or construction. Like you can be an expert at building a house. I think you can be pretty good at programming, but I don't think you can be simultaneously an expert in programming and in communication and in explanation and like teaching. And I think there's this Venn diagram that occurs of where an expert programmer would lie, of like, here's being a great programmer. Like the guy I was working with, he's an excellent programmer, pretty good communicator too, but nowhere close to like as clear as like what you and I are talking about. So there's like being an expert an expert programmer, an expert in that Rust, Anchor, Solana thing. Then there's like being an expert communicator of like, I'm going to name my variables right. And then like an expert organizer, and an expert architect, and an expert teacher. Because when you really think about it, if you're going to be an expert developer, you need to also be an expert teacher in that the things you write down to tell the computer what to do, also tell the people that you're talking to in the future through your code, whether it's yourself, your teammates, students, whatever. This is how you should change this program to do the next thing that you're inevitably going to want to meld this software to do. So when you look at this quintuple Venn diagram, in the middle would be an expert programmer. And there's no one on earth, I fucking guarantee it, that sits there. It's like if Richard Feynman was a programmer, which he kind of was, but he didn't have React. He didn't have Ruby on Rails. He didn't have machine learning frameworks to deal with, Keras and TensorFlow and what a tensor, like he didn't have to explain that to anybody, and he didn't have to understand that and use it. So I think imposter syndrome comes from the fact that we are all novices. And so we have a various spectrum of novices where some of us are senior, some of us are architectural engineers, whatever it may be. Some of us are CTOs, whatever it is. And none of us are truly experts. And so, of course, everyone feels like an imposter because we all are imposters. And yet we can't say that we're imposters because we're getting paid $200,000 a year. And we're like, just don't say anything. We'll keep getting paid, And so I think that's an interesting thing to chew on at the end of all this, and would absolutely love to dive into Solana and help get you up to speed with where I am, and then jump past that so we can start building some cool stuff on the blockchain together.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I have one thought that Kevin Kelly, in his book The Inevitable, he mentions that we're all constant newbies now, right? Like what you mentioned, like we're constantly getting to new things that we've never seen before, and that we have to get started from scratch with. And, we're getting used to the constant updates and being continuously learning new things and looking at UIs and instructions and reading. I think that's going to become the normal, right? Like before, you new things, and then it's like the younger generations catch up with new technology. But now we're growing with this mindset that the normal, or like the status quo, is like to be changing continuously, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I wish we could just take this and just completely blur out the face. Like I just want the ideas to be communicated. And I want like people that are interested in communicating the ideas to come back and build this like cool thing. You do some cool stuff. And that's another problem that I want to solve is like content discovery. I was watching Aaron Schwartz's documentaries, and he was talking about an idea that I've thought about too. I would love to talk with Aaron Schwartz. Unfortunately, the government made him kill himself because he was trying to free information. Like it's so asinine. He was talking about how now everybody has a platform, so it obscures everybody's voice, but it's also now the algorithms that we've given in the hands of 3 companies, maybe 2 companies, are responsible for determining who gets heard. And I'm going to step out on a limb here and say these conversations deserve to be heard. Like it would be cool to have them heard in the appropriate proportionality to the community that they'd be received in well. And I think they're so niche and so strange that community would be fairly small, but it's still like such an effort to chop up these ideas that we've been going over for the last 2 hours, hour and a half, and like get them out to anybody that gives a shit. So that's another problem, content discoverability, that I've got ideas how to solve too, that maybe we can talk about at a future time.
Awesome. Thanks, Em, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a blast.
Before you go, I'd like to remind you that you can find a detailed list of episode notes at gettingsimple.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.